Race weekend, it's the Spanish Grand Prix, and the most notable Spanish driver out of contract, because I would never want to say that the most notable Spanish driver is not Fernando Alonso, at least not yet. Carlos Sainz says this: it's been taking up a lot of space in my mind. He's expecting a decision to happen soon. Tim, there was approaches with Red Bull. There were approaches with Mercedes. Both of those, obviously, for varying reasons, didn't happen. There is the Sauber, soon-to-be Audi deal on the table. There's a rumored Williams deal on the table. Do you think we get an announcement from the Spaniard at the Spanish Grand Prix?
I have a feeling we're going to get an announcement soon from Carlos, whether or not that happens on Friday or it happens later next week. Hearing from him in the press conference today, Adam, it does sounds like he wants this to be over. I think because about obviously all the questions from everybody, including myself. I actually interrogated him about it 2 weeks ago. So I think for him, the sooner he can kind of get this thing wrapped up, the better it is. I think it's going to be Williams. Now, I'm not saying that I know something that other people don't, but I have a feeling it will be Williams. I'm not too sure how interested he was in the Sauber deal. I mean, he still may be interested in the Sauber deal. He may end up going to Sauber. I'm just giving people what I think at this moment. But we'll wait and see in the next few days. Either way, I think, Adam, the way we kind of look at it is he's essentially, like it was said today, he is the cork in the bottle. He is.
So and a lot of cards will fall after him.
100%. So as soon as he makes his mind up, and then I think we're going to get a lot of reaction in the driver market very quickly. I think it probably will end up we'll get something from Sainz, and then we'll get something from Valtteri. I have a feeling it's going to be either or for one of those two drivers. So if Carlos goes to Williams, I think Valtteri may stay at Sauber. If Carlos goes to Sauber, then I think Valtteri will then go to Williams. Only because if we look at the field, and yes, I know Pierre Gasly is still, his contract is up as well. But if we go by experience, I would say the best two drivers for that are Carlos Sainz and Valtteri Bottas, whose contracts are up for next season, starting with Carlos, then go to Valtteri. Then we'll see what happens with Pierre, Esteban, et cetera, and the remaining Mercedes seat, which looks like it's going to be Kimi Antonelli, who's going to jump into that seat for next season.
Wow.
But if we look at this decision from Carlos, Adam, it's an interesting one, right? Because there's nothing available for him further up the grid. So, what's your next best option? So if you feel that, Sauber / Audi are not going to be able to get it done for a few years, and by get it done, I mean move from the back of the grid up into midfield and then challenge for podiums, that could take a long time. And I'm not sitting here saying that Audi can't do it, but at the end of the day, F1 is a difficult sport. It takes a really long time to get good at it. And for a new team, new auto manufacturer getting involved in Formula One, it takes a while. And is that so many moving parts?
But Williams, I mean, like James Vowles talked about the fact that they're just moving off of the spreadsheet system for how they build the car. Like it's not like listen, James Vowles has had unbelievable positive impact since joining that team, truly. But it's not like Williams are right there, right?
Definitely not. I think the biggest thing for them is infrastructure, and the faster that they can turn the factory around and get new equipment in there, I mean, the better off they're going to be and the more competitive they're going to be. If you think about, I mean, honestly, if you go to their factory, like I was there last year, and you just take a look at that thing and you compare that to what Aston Martin rolled out last year, which I also got to go and see, and I'm also going to get to go back there this July. It's a night and day difference. And to see what the team has been able to do with what they have is pretty impressive. And so that's why I think if I'm Carlos, I would take a look at that as a 2-year plan plus maybe a 1-year option. and see where it goes. I think that's his best option for competitiveness. I think that would be the next best option after, like, obviously he's not going to RB, right? Like,
yeah.
The next one up would be Williams, in my opinion.
So how do you play this if you're Carlos Sainz? Because I'm curious about this. Maybe Williams is headed back to being a championship team, but that could be half a decade, Tim. Like, we don't know.
It could be a while. Yeah, for sure.
And they are a Mercedes engine. The rumors are that for 2026, the Mercedes power unit is the best one so far. But again, we're talking 18 months. A lot changes in 18 months. So, they're on a Mercedes power unit. Maybe they have a really good start. Maybe they're able to get going. Maybe they find a thing, whatever. There's a lot of maybes here. Is the play for Carlos Sainz here, though, to put himself at the team where he can show off his best self and then hopefully jump back in with one of the top teams in a couple of years?
100%. I think if you can get on a team that's going to put you closer to the midfield, closer to scoring points consistently. And then, I mean, who knows if Mercedes, churns out a great power unit for, Alex Albon said this to us when we sat down to talk to him 2 weeks ago. And it was essentially, he was basically saying, like, Mercedes, their power unit is looking pretty good. And essentially, if they can roll out a power unit that's very competitive, and then Williams, all they have to really focus on is trying to put out a car that's good aerodynamically. I mean, they've already got a leg up on the rest of the competition if the engine is better than everybody else's engine. It's kind of like going back to 2014, 2015 when Williams were, right back up fighting for P4, P3 in the constructors. We had races where Williams drivers like Valtteri Bottas were finishing on the podium. So if they can get that right, I mean, that makes sense for Carlos to go there, right? Because you're then basically putting yourself in a position where you can showcase what you can do more often, and if a seat opens up somewhere, then you just slot yourself into it, right? Who's to say that one day he couldn't go back to Ferrari, right, Adam? Like, who's to say that he couldn't do that? Like, Lewis isn't going to be around, like, he's not going to go for another 10 years. I mean, but Carlos probably can go for another 10 years, right? Because of the age difference, obviously. And so who's to say that, like, if Lewis, wins his championship, wins his 8th, and then decides to leave Ferrari, then if Carlos is still performing really well, he's still showing off quite a bit, then who's to say he can't just go back to Ferrari, right? I mean, obviously, this is all pie in the sky stuff we're talking about. But, I mean, at the end of the day, if he has a good relationship that he's been able to maintain with some of the teams that are at the front, then, if he's putting up good performances, then why can't he, right? I mean, it only makes sense. And so then, Adam, if you think about it, like, then why go to Sauber? Like, at the moment, I hate to say it, the worst team on the grid, the slowest car on the grid. And they have a lot of work to do. So I don't know. It's kind of like, do you want to go to a team where, I mean, next year it could be tough there as well, right? You're ushering in basically new owners. You're ushering in a massive car manufacturer. Who's to say they want to put money into the 2025 regulation in the car? And so that car may not be very good. You're going to be starting all the way at the back for most of it. And let's just say Williams pushes forward more and they're able to score points more. So it's kind of like, where do you want to really go?
The one hole in that plan, Tim, and I know that drivers can't think this way because they all have to believe that they're the best driver on the grid. And that's the mentality you need to have. The one hole in that plan is Alex Albon's a very good driver. Yeah. And if Carlos Sainz doesn't come in with the same car as Albon and kick his ass, maybe it's Albon who comes out looking better than Carlos.
That's actually, man, if you look at it and you look at like where that team is right now, right, Adam? Because it's like, I mean, Alex has some big crashes at the beginning of the season, which then, unfortunately, that essentially screws Logan, right? Like, there's a race he doesn't get to compete in because he's got to give his chassis up to Alex, who is the number one driver at that team. And so they can't make parts. They can't get the third chassis ready. I mean, they just barely got the chassis ready for Bahrain testing. Like, I was there. I was like, is this thing going to roll out? Like,
unbelievable.
So
unbelievable.
No, so they're already kind of like on the back foot, Adam, when it comes to development of that car. But if they're able to, which I think they can do. I mean, if they can cut the weight on the Williams car for this year and bring some bigger upgrades, which I think they can. I think at the moment they're punching above their weight level. They just are. Alex has been fantastic in this back part of the season so far, the last 3 races or whatever. He's been really good. Mm-hmm. So again, like, he was in contention for points even in Canada. So I think, Adam, when you look at all of it, I mean, I would say if the team is able to make a big step this year and then be more prepared for next season, then maybe they're not running into these issues where they have been for the last 5-6 years of, okay, one driver gets all the upgrades, and then the other driver's only going to get the upgrades when they're ready, which could be in a few races' time. And so then we're only going to have one car that's going to be competitive enough to get into the points while the other car is going to be lagging behind.
Right.
And so for them, I think it's trying to get to the point where for next season, both cars are getting upgrades at the same time, both chassis, the spare chassis, everything is ready to go as soon as, we get into testing. And so it's a roll of the dice, but I mean, I think James has done a great job at that team, and I think he's really turned them around quite a bit, Adam. So,
and quickly.
Yeah, very quickly, actually. That's a good point.
Yeah,
very quickly.
What's your read on Dorilton Capital, who were the owners who purchased it from Claire Williams in 2000? Do you think that or 2020, I believe, not 2000? What's your read on their interest in investing? I wonder if bringing a guy like Carlos Sainz to the team from Ferrari makes them more apt to invest more money faster.
I think that, well, from my understanding, and the folks that I've talked to, Dorilton has invested quite a bit into the team behind the scenes. So in terms of getting that factory up and getting it going again, right? Mm-hmm. And I think for them, that's extremely important, right? Because like I had mentioned, so many old components in that car or in that factory that it's like it doesn't churn parts out the way that Formula One team should turn out parts. And I think also going out, Adam, and getting Pat Fry was a huge boost of confidence for the team. And
for anybody who doesn't know, Pat Fry, tell us who he is. Quick background.
Yeah, so basically, Pat Fry he's a big time engineer. Basically, he had left Alpine and then went down to Williams, started at Williams basically at the beginning of this year. Mm-hmm. And he has been an integral part of like getting them off of like the spreadsheet and getting them onto like, newer systems of like building a car and how do we find parts so we can keep building our car, because there literally were stories of them losing like bolts and nuts and they couldn't even find them. They didn't know where they were. They weren't in the spreadsheet and they couldn't find them in the factory anywhere. And so, they were able to, Pat and James working together, able to right the ship in that sense. And I'm also been told they got a couple of other big hires coming up. And so I don't know who they are at the moment. And then for James to go out and just say, like, we're going after Adrian Newey.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I talked to him about it, and I'm like, so, you're going after Adrian Newey. He's like, I'd like to go after Adrian Newey. We're going to try and go after Adrian Newey. So I think that in itself shows you that Dorilton has confidence in what James is doing, but it's also invested into the project, which I think is really important, investing in the team. And it shows, they definitely have put money into this thing. And I think behind the scenes, Adam, that's where most of their investment is going, like new equipment, capital expenditures.
Right. And that's got to be, that was the biggest problem with Williams, right? Is they were falling behind on that level. It's interesting. Watched a Claire Williams interview clip and she said that, I think there's a part of her that regrets selling the team. I think there's a part of her that goes, man, I wish it hadn't come to that. I wish I'd had the guts to hang on. But there's been a shift in the sport from, owner operators like, her family, and obviously Frank and that sort of situation, to companies, massive corporations. It's very difficult for a family that's their business, right? And we've seen this across sports. That's their business, to compete with a company that's also selling 500,000 or 600,000 cars every year. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a challenge. How do you make up for that revenue? How do you keep up with these companies? And with the rate of technology, it used to be that you found the smartest engineer and you're good. But like now you need the smartest engineers, and you need the best computer programs, and you need this and you need that. And by the way, that upgrades every year, and that's a CapEx every year. It's I think I feel for her on that instance. I wonder if maybe she feels now maybe she should have brought on a partner rather than selling out the whole way. But I do think it would have been very difficult for them to compete if she'd even held on.
It would have been tough, right? If you look at, I think, don't quote me on the amount, but I believe she had sold for about 100 and, or not she, I mean, Williams had sold it for, I think it was around $170 million in and around that range. I mean, the team is worth probably 7 times more than that now. I think, though, would they have been able to keep up as a team and actually, really, really compete? That's the part that's tough. I really don't think they could have, and that's not anything against the Williams family or Claire Williams or anything against the job that they had done. It's just the amount of investment that would have been required to get the team as competitive as possible, to rework your CapEx, to rework your factory. We also need to talk about wind tunnel. Like, you need to upgrade that stuff, your loop simulator, your driver simulator, your CFD designs, like everything that goes into all of that would have needed to be reworked as well. And so you're talking about, like, you're not talking about a couple $1 million, right, Adam? You're talking like $50 to $100 million. Like, that's what we're talking about. Like, for CapEx, like, that's what they're looking for. And so you need a big investment firm like a Dorilton to come in, scoop it up, and then inject the money so they can make the money back, which they are, because of how valuable the team is worth now. So it's really hard. Maybe she could have taken on a partner. I don't necessarily think that they knew the direction that Formula One was going to go in. None of us did, right? Like, Formula One literally exploded in like a year.
Yes.
It took off, right? And no one was prepared for it. So there's that. I mean, it is tough, right? Because, like, I'm trying to remember how much Alpine did their deal last year?
I can look it up. I'll look it up right now.
I want to say it was about $250 million. I want to say it was about 250 million.
Yeah, 200 million pounds. 24% of the team. So $1 billion valuation.
So that's the thing. You have to hold on. So if you're the Williams family, you have to hold on until that evaluation comes through. And so that's a lot of pain, man. Like, that's a lot of, like, back of the grid starts, maybe not being ready for testing, some really difficult decisions behind the scenes as well. Like, it would have been tough for them to do it, even if they had a big backer at the time. Like, even if they got $250,000, like, it probably still wouldn't have been enough, Adam.
Yeah, well, and I wonder, because Claire is so well spoken, and I know we've kind of gotten off track here, but Claire's so well spoken, and her knowledge is so deep. Oh, no, that's what a podcast is. Yeah. I wonder. I always look at her and I'm like, man, like, they've got some commentators on Sky Sports that people are highly critical of. I always feel like Claire would be great.
Yeah,
if she wanted to. She doesn't need it. Like, she's got the money. She doesn't need it, but
no, she's an excellent team principal, Adam, and she gave a lot of people a lot of chances. And honestly, like, it was sad to see them sell the team. it was sad to see her kind of leave the sport. I hope she comes back, to be honest with you. And yeah, even getting her on TV, I think
Yeah.
that would be awesome. Like getting her
Be
on
cool,
Sky
right?
Sports, like she'd do a great job there. She'd do. Won't carry on with that statement.
Yeah, no,
but
we'll just
she'd
keep
do
it.
a
We'll
good
just keep it at
job.
that. She'd do great.
She'd
do great
Yeah,
at the
she
expense
would.
of no one. And also to offer a different perspective, because she's not a former Formula One driver. I think it's important to get a different perspective other than just the drivers. No offense to all the drivers that are talking for them, and I think that's great. But the business side of it, people do care, and I think that's it's a major part of it. So on the Williams track, since we're talking about them so much going into the Spanish Grand Prix, and I promise you we will do a little bit of a preview of that. I want to talk about Logan Sargeant, who will finally, for the first weekend this year, and I don't think anybody really knows this unless you're hardcore, Tim, Logan Sargeant is going to get his first equal car to Alex Albon all year.
That's
that's crazy.
So I think behind the scenes, for Logan, he's really been pushing. I know, obviously James Vowles has to make a decision on his drivers for next year, and I mean, if you're able to get a driver like a Carlos Sainz, it sucks for Logan, but you do. I can see James's position. You have to go and get the best driver that's out there, and Carlos is an incredible driver, and I would want him on my team too. And for Logan, I think for him behind the scenes, really pushing James to just wait on making a decision until both cars are equal, and giving him a chance, so to speak. But I'm not too sure if what happened in Canada maybe affected things. But I was talking to James about it, and he basically said, "Look, Logan has to do better. He wasn't doing good enough," and he said there was still an opening for him, and that was back in Canada before the race had started. When he was telling me that, he was just saying, "Look, there is still a window where Logan can be in this seat for next year or whatever, but there is a lot he's got to do to get on that level." And then I'm thinking well, hold on a second here. I'm like, how you're telling? I didn't get to follow up. I wanted to, but I was thinking in my head as he's saying that, I'm like, well, hold on a second here. The cars aren't equal, and you're saying he's got to be better. I'm like, wait, this doesn't add up. I'm like, you've got to we got to look at this a little differently here. Maybe what James is maybe referring to, I think, is the Grand Prix performance as a whole, and then obviously maybe qualifying performances as well. Then when Logan would have an opportunity to beat Alex, maybe making a mistake here or there. He is closer to Alex this year than he was last year. There is no doubt about that. The data is telling everyone that. But just not being able to qualify him yet has been really tough, I think. Do you
think if he gets close, I'm not expecting Logan Sargeant to outqualify Albon, but if he gets close, does Williams consider it, or is it just kind of this might be it?
It's tough to say. I think it might be it. But let's wait and see, obviously. I mean, we still haven't gotten any announcements on that Williams seat just yet. So at the moment, it's still Logan's for sure. Let's wait and see what happens Friday and next week. But at the moment, I mean, it's still sort of Logan's to lose.
Mm-hmm.
I would hope, Adam, that they would keep him on as a reserve driver, to be honest with you. Because I think he's Alex had said this. He even said Logan's really good. He has a lot of raw speed. And usually when a driver just has raw speed, it just takes time to develop them. That's just all there is just, you just got to takes time. And
look at Alex.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I think if Logan does end up losing that seat, I hope that they would keep him on as a reserve driver and just keep him at the team, keep him working on the car, keep him in the simulator, keep him doing stuff. And then maybe one day he gets another chance either at the team or somewhere else in Formula One, because that guy, he really worked his ass off to get there.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the the thing I wanted to ask you next is Alpine. You had a really passionate stance on Alpine potentially walking away, or Renault walking away from being an engine supplier.
Don't get me started, Adam. Don't get me started.
No, I won't get you started again on that. But I do want to talk about the fact that you've got more information on them on a different subject.
Yeah, it has to do with Gasly and Esteban Ocon. So do you remember? So Adam, do you remember during the Canadian Grand Prix, Ocon had moved over for Pierre to take the spot and go after Daniel Ricciardo. It sounds like Pierre feels that when Esteban let him go by, it was 2 laps too late to catch up to DR. So Esteban wouldn't comment on it, but I mean, he did talk quite a bit about his future and what he's looking for at another team. Just being on a team that is supportive is something that he had inferred. And, that speaks to me that he may not be getting the support that he wants or needs at the moment.
Right. Interesting. Where do you think there's been rumors about a few teams, but Haas seems to be the weird front runner there. Do you think that there's something coming there?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's where he lands. I think he ends up at Haas. Again, Adam, one of those things where, you hope that the team's going in the right direction, and you just hang on and you just try and fight for points, still put up good fights, still keep yourself in the mix. And hopefully as you start to peak as a driver, there may be a seat that opens up a couple doors down or whatever, and you can just go and jump into that, right?
So it's literally the same sort of thing as Carlos Sainz, right? Like, just put yourself in a position to look good, and if a seat opens up, you might have a really good shot at it.
I think so. I think it's something like that. I mean, think about how long Carlos Sainz has been in Formula One for, right? And now he's really starting to, I would say over the last 3 seasons, he's really started to show like what he can do. I would say the start of last year was a bit of an anomaly for him, but once he started figuring that part of it out, he was back to being a really strong driver up at the front of the grid and battling Charles Leclerc's teammate. And then obviously being the only one who won last year, for Ferrari. And then at one point was the only driver to win for Ferrari this year until Charles Leclerc won in Monaco. So, he's been in F1 for a really long time, and he hung on, right? He hung on, and he finally made his way back, not back, but he finally made his way up the grid, right? Now he's going back to have a chance and hopefully going back up the grid again one day.
Do you think we'll see any surprises this weekend when it comes to the Spanish Grand Prix? Because obviously, for people that don't tune into every race, what are the expectations at this? We do know it's a fast corner race.
A lot of high speed content. It's a really fast track. Done a lot of laps here. And so have the F1 drivers. I mean, all of them who've raced here have done a ton of laps, right? It's a track that they're all very comfortable with, but it's also one of those tracks where teams get a barometer of like where everybody is, where do we stack up in the grid? Because it's the perfect track, like I was mentioning the last episode, but it's like the perfect track of like high speed, mid speed, low speed, braking, all of the good things.
Right.
And you get a very great understanding of your aero balance from the car, and so essentially you know where you are. I think there's some, it's a coin toss at this moment when we take a look at who's going to be good here, Adam, because hearing from Charles Leclerc today, I mean, he thinks Red Bull's going to come out and be extremely strong. But then hearing from Carlos Sainz, he thinks that Ferrari could potentially put some pressure on Red Bull for a win. Ferrari does have some upgrades coming this weekend, so we'll see what happens with those. But you listen to Lando Norris, and Lando thinks that the McLaren can be in contention for race wins here this weekend. So I think this whole weekend, we are going to get a picture of where everybody is.
Right.
And let's say that, like, I mean, whatever. If Red Bull is a 10th up on the top 3 teams, that's great for the rest of the season moving forward. If, Max wins by 3 seconds, that's also great for the rest of the season, because it shows that those teams really have clawed into that deficit from Red Bull. So
right.
That's what's going to be interesting to see this entire weekend. And it's going to throw up some surprises at us too, Adam. Like it just will. Like either Red Bull's going to come out and smash everybody, or we're going to get something that's really close.
What do you think really happens? Like if you're going to, and I won't hold you to this, but like, what are your thoughts on how this is going to go? If you're going to pick somebody right now, who would it be to be the team that really dominates this weekend?
I wouldn't even say dominate. That's the thing, though. Like we haven't had anyone who's dominated in the last 4 or 5 races.
Yep.
Like no one's dominated. Like show me who has dominated. Red Bull has been good, but everybody else seems to have done a better job, specifically at the last 4 or 5 tracks. And they put pressure on Red Bull, and that's what it was all about this season anyways, was trying to put pressure on that team and forcing them into mistakes. And some races they have done that. And so it's tough when you're racing against a driver as good as Max Verstappen on the level he's at right now, Adam, because he's not making a lot of mistakes. And I honestly, if he just makes little mistakes here or there, it's over. Like you're going to have other teams, you're going to have the McLarens, you're going to have the Ferraris breathing down his neck and coming by for race victories. And so that's where Max needs to be perfect. Last year, mistakes could be masked, right?
Right, yeah, absolutely.
So there you go.
Now, let's talk about Sergio Perez then. Talking about mistakes not being able to be masked. How big is this weekend for him?
Yeah, I think it's a big one. I think for Sergio, it's not getting lost in what Max is doing. So last year for Sergio, I think just trying to venture off into different setup directions. Obviously I think that really affected him and affected the confidence. Yeah. And then you get rolled up, and I've talked about this before about Sergio. You kind of get rolled up into that snowball, and it just kind of goes downhill, and there's just no stopping it, because the more you screw with things, the more you start losing your confidence. It just becomes this, dirt hole that you spiral down through, right? Yes. So I think for like Sergio, one of the things is learning what Max is doing with setup, and then trying to tinker with certain things to get it into his sort of operating window where he could feel comfortable. And that's the thing with this car, right? It is designed for Max and his unique driving style. But, that for Sergio is maybe, don't get too lost in what Verstappen is doing setup-wise. Maybe start with that baseline, and then start veering off in your own direction just a bit, not like you were doing last year. Because what Max is doing with setup, there's nobody who can drive the way he does, right? It's so unique. So
he's got a unique style.
And that's why it's so tough to be his teammate, right?
Yeah.
Like very, very tough, because you can't, even if you have a number 1 and a number 2 driver, which, they do, it's very hard for that number 2 driver to even get really far up against him because of that specific driving style. You can't change what you do with the race car, because you're going to scare the hell out of yourself, and you're going to lose a lot of confidence, or you're going to crash a lot of cars.
Yeah.
So
okay, all right. All right, Tim. Well, listen, I think we're in for a good weekend. We're in for a good, fun weekend. I like it. And hopefully we get some driver announcements. I did notice that Lance Stroll, he said there will be an announcement on continuation soon. Fair to say he stays with Aston Martin, I would say. I don't, it might shock everybody, but I think he's staying. Could you confirm that, Tim?
I mean, come on.
I like that he had a good sense of humor about it, though, don't you? Like, I think
Yeah,
that's
no,
funny.
it was great. I definitely think Lance will be back at the team next year. Don't see him going anywhere. I mean, he's very committed. He's committed to the project. He's committed to this long-term project, and so. I found his comments about Adrian Newey like interesting though. Like,
What did he say?
I think he had said something like we have an exciting young team, so that could be of interest for him. Something along those lines. I'm paraphrasing. But there's been a lot of talk at him about Adrian Newey and Aston Martin.
Well, there's the rumor going around this week that everybody at Aston Martin was told to leave the factory. Because Adrian Newey was going to come in and for a quiet tour, and I'm like, how are you calling that a quiet tour if everybody's leaving the factory?
Yeah.
So I don't know how true that is, Tim. I don't know if you can confirm any of that, but that seems like you'd maybe want to bring him in overnight.
Here's the thing with Adrian Newey, Adam. Like all of our listeners and viewers knows, he's the best. Everyone is going to be going after him. It doesn't matter who you are. Every single team would love to have him on their team. He's Adrian Newey. That's it.
That's it.
Of course, you're going to want to try and get him to your factory to give him a tour and show him around. Like, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Everybody wants the guy, right?
Yeah.
I think it comes down to what he wants to do. Where does he want to go? Who does he want to work with? And what's the project look like?
Yeah, what I love is Eddie Jordan's podcast. Eddie's like, listen, it'll come down to whatever F1 team he likes or his boat. It's like, all right, well, I suppose he's earned that.
Oh man, I still think at the end of the day, my gut feeling, Ferrari, I think I still think he ends up there. Only because why wouldn't you want to try and race with Ferrari? You know what I mean? Try to get Ferrari back to where they were. Adam. So what are your plans for the weekend?
My plans for the weekend? Man. Okay, so obviously fitting the race in, obviously fitting qualifying in, but I also have to fit in the fact that my wife is Dutch and the Netherlands are playing tomorrow at 3:00, and then we got the Stanley Cup final tomorrow at 8:00. We got free practice 1, 2, 3, and then it's Netherlands, and then it's going to be all sports day tomorrow. And then depending upon whether or not the Edmonton Oilers extend, we may be doing some events next week. So, it's crazy. And then right away, Tim, we get into draft and free agency next week. It's right. Just the NHL. People complain about the Formula One schedule. I think it's quite human and humane. The NHL schedule is ridiculous. So I'm kind of excited for whatever the Stanley Cup outcome is. It's been a great series, but I also know that next week is going to be just insanity, and you just kind of have to deal with it.
So who wins? Do you think they're going to tie this thing up? So at the moment, the listeners over, because we have a lot
overseas.
Of listeners overseas. Actually, we have listeners all over the world, which is great.
Yeah.
So the NHL Stanley Cup Finals are on. Florida Panthers, Edmonton Oilers. So Florida was kicking Edmonton's ass. Yep. And was up big in the series. And now Edmonton has managed to claw back the deficit. Best of 7. It's now 3-2 for Florida. And now they head back to Edmonton. So they're playing in Edmonton Friday night or Saturday night?
They're playing in Edmonton Friday night. And then they're going to play, if they go to Game 7, in Florida on Monday night. And it's a 7-hour plane ride. Wow,
it's that long?
It's that long. Really? It's one of the longest Stanley Cup distances ever.
Whew, I didn't know that. I didn't think it was
crazy,
bad.
Huh?
Yeah, that's wild.
Yeah.
So
no, it's bad.
It's bad. Your opinion, Adam, on this Stanley Cup, finals. What do you like this? What's going on?
The smartest hockey mind I know.
I know it's not the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know it's not the.
No, I know. But the smartest hockey mind I know, Chris Johnson, says so Edmonton went down 3-0 in a 7-game series. You got to win 4 to win the series, and then they won Game 4. And so it's 3-1, and Chris Johnson said, Oilers in 7, book it. Or at least this series is going to 7 games, is what he meant. So I picked Oilers in 7. So I'm going to stick to that pick, Tim. I'm usually wrong. I make a point of being wrong accidentally, literally all the time. So we'll see. But I'm excited, and I think I'm pumped for the city of Edmonton, pumped for Florida too, because it's nice to see hockey take off in a quote unquote non-traditional market. And I don't know, man. I'm excited for that, and then I'm excited for a couple weeks from now when all the free agency stuff. It's like a transfer window if you're in Europe. All that sort of calms down, and I can probably sit at my wife's cottage and relax for a few weeks. It's been a long season.
I know. Actually, you guys have been working really hard, man. So it's it's good. I don't know, man. It's like running your own business, doing your own thing, right, Adam? It's a lot of work, but you guys are doing a great job. So I love the content, love the show. For those of you listening and watching, SDP is really good show. Check it out for sure. But like Adam, I want to see this thing go 7, but I think like my girlfriend, she just wants.
She's
to
a
see
Canucks fan, right?
No, she wants to see some rats on the ice. So
she wants to see some rats on the ice.
That's all she cares about.
Yeah,
that's all she cares. She doesn't care anything else. I just want to see some rats on the ice. So like,
well, the Florida, if you don't know, Florida loves to throw rats on the ice after a win. Not real rats, rubber rats. And it doesn't make any sense, but that's what they do. So we'll see. We'll see.
Just real quick, Adam, explain to the listeners and viewers about the rats. Like, I think it was.
So I don't know how.
It was a playoff game. It was a playoff game, and it was someone had scored. Like, I'm going to get melted in the comments for this one, but like, wasn't it like one of them scored a hat trick, and they had seen a rat in the locker room before the game had started.
Yes. Okay. So here's the story.
Okay.
Calgary Flames, Florida Panthers. A rat appeared in the Panthers locker room in the old Miami arena. Former Panthers captain Scott Mellenby jumped up, grabbed a stick, and smacked it against the wall. Later that night, he scored 2 goals, leading Panthers goalie John Van Beesbrook to quip, he scored a rat trick. And as the legend goes, the next night, a fan threw a plastic rat on the ice. And the following night, there were more plastic rats. And it has become a Florida tradition ever since. How wild is that?
So messed up, man.
So weird. It's so weird. Hockey's a weird thing, man. It's a very weird sport.
Messed up. Anyways, Adam, thanks for doing this, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Tim. Have a good one and enjoy your Spanish Grand Prix.